78679, parking and loading facilities shall be provided as required by section 711.2 of this chapter. No parking shall be permitted in any required front setback other than that which would occur on an improved driveway. 712.2 E1A1 states land disturbing activities shall not occur within a 30-foot undisturbed buffer around all perennial and intermittent surface waters, streams. 712.2 F3A states 30-foot undisturbed aquatic buffer shall be required along perennial and intermittent water bodies. Landowners may challenge the classification of a stream, et cetera, et cetera. By approval of this ordinance, NC Division of Water Quality hereby authorizes appropriately trained city staff to make a field determination of the stream. The stream has been determined to be a jurisdictional stream. So this collection of variances will allow the applicant to construct a single-family dwelling, SFD, on the subject parcel. The first two variances will allow a reduced front setback and a parking arrangement to reduce the impact on the 30-foot aquatic buffer. The city regulates that residential parking must occur on an approved driveway, and the applicant has proposed a parallel parking space approximately 9 by 18 feet. This design cannot be approved at a staff level review due to the need for the vehicle to use a public right-of-way to maneuver in and out of the parking space. The combination of the front setback reduction and the parking standards are meant to allow the applicant to construct a reasonable building footprint while reducing the impact to the aquatic buffer. The second and third variance will allow the applicant to conduct the necessary grading or disturbance activity and construct a permanent structure within a portion of the aquatic buffer. This table provides the breakdown and percentages of the specific requests to each section. So for the aquatic buffer, the requirements listed there in the second column: no land disturbing activity shall occur within a 30-foot undisturbed buffer around all perennial and intermittent surface waters. The applicant's request is an encroachment of approximately 708 square feet into the 30-foot aquatic buffer, a 37% reduction of the total aquatic buffer area on the subject parcel. Furthermore, the second item would be a reduction of the 30-foot aquatic buffer to the line that's running across the property to 20 feet for the construction of one single-family dwelling and associated parking area. That's a result of a 33.3% reduction to the aquatic buffer boundary, 19.1% reduction of the total aquatic buffer area. For the setback section, it's requesting a reduction from 15 to 10, 33.3 reduction in the setback. And for the parking, it would be a 100% waiver on our current parking and loading standards. Show the location here. So you can see Waynesville Avenue running downhill towards the larger parcel, which is New Belgium. And there's a light blue outline of the subject parcel towards the center of the page. This is a little bit closer view. You can see that the subject parcel is surrounded by RM8, except for the New Belgium brewery to the north. And then you can see the footprint of the stream running to the rear of the Waynesville Avenue parcels. Subject parcel located in West Asheville near the River Arts District up the hill from New Belgium. The board has heard and approved numerous variances for single-family dwellings along Waynesville Avenue and neighboring streets such as Deaver Street. The existing site conditions shown via the applicant's site plan illustrate a parcel that's 0.065 acre, which is roughly 2,800 831.4 square feet. It is a substandard parcel as it doesn't meet the underlying requirements for development standards for the parcel area. The parcel has a 33.68% average slope. The parcel has 38.13 feet of frontage along Waynesville Avenue, also a substandard measurement. The property slopes downwards from Waynesville Avenue to the stream towards the rear of the property or the east. After the stream, the property slopes back upwards towards the neighboring property. The applicant is proposing 850 to 925 square foot single-family dwelling constructed on standard block foundation with an unfinished or partially finished basement. The home will consist of 2 bedrooms and 1.5 bathrooms. So the parcel or the land associated with this parcel have been transferred 5 times at least, starting back in 2007. The city's resolution to update 712-2 to regulate disturbance and development within the aquatic buffer occurred in June of 2010. Therefore, this qualifies for a variance. The applicant has shown grading, erosion control, mitigation, and revegetation on the proposed site in accordance with the city-provided checklist. Upon granting the above variances, the applicant must move forward with a residential SFD permit within 1 year of the board's decision. The permit will be subject to review and once granted to regular grading inspections. The proposed plans, if approved, will be conducted with guidance from the city's UDO and approved riparian species list. And I will state, you guys have seen similar cases before. You can attach conditions, to that permitting review process. So the review, analysis, and considerations. Subject property is zoned RM8. Minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet, 50 feet of road frontage. The subject parcel is substandard. The aquatic buffer takes up approximately 1,921 square feet of a 2,821 square feet residentially zoned parcel. Along with setbacks, parking requirements, and the buffer, this parcel is undevelopable. Due to the size of the non-conforming lot, only one principal dwelling and associated accessory structures may be constructed. The applicant has not proposed an accessory structure on this plan set. Based on the applicant provided existing site conditions, plans, and site development plan, the proposed grading necessary to construct the homes does not meet the aquatic buffer restrictions for land disturbance. Proposed homes do not meet the post-construction aquatic buffer requirements applied to permanent improvements. There are approximately 35.5 linear feet of aquatic buffer within the project site running south to north. The applicant proposes to impact the entire length of the aquatic buffer. The applicant without a variance could potentially pipe the entire length of the stream and remove the buffer entirely per city, NCDEQ, and Army Corps of Engineers standards. So if the variance weren't approved, there's a potential that the stream could be engineered and piped, therefore removing the buffer. Setback and parking variances are inspired in part to reduce the impact related to the stream buffer. Conditions clarifying the allowed grading extent and/or permanent improvements may be considered with this request, as previously stated. Okay. Not sure what that means. I did have some additional site photos attached here, but I guess we only have 3 that are uploaded. This is a photograph taken from Waynesville Avenue. Let me enlarge this again, sorry. So you can see the path of the stream down below. Several large maturing trees and other species throughout the property. Here's a different angle shot. This one's looking more towards the north and then back up the hill towards the rear property. And then I included this. This is what our standard driveway looks like. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at the parking arrangement that the applicant has provided on his site plan. So this is Exhibit C, D, and F. Here you can see the shaded aquatic buffer area, the stream kind of running in a zigzag from south to north, downstream towards New Belgium, French Broad River. Average slope is shown there, and the linear feet of the aquatic buffer line. You can see the building envelope created by the building setbacks for RM8. Here I've added some additional measurements to the applicant's provided site plan to show the permanent as well as a temporary disturbance area, 708.35 square feet, as it relates to the building envelope, the aquatic buffer, and the building's footprint. You can also see the intended riparian zone remediation and plantings. And then here is the area that will be temporarily impacted but not permanently impacted by the granting of the variance. So that's the 2 different sections in 712-2. Any questions?
Would you go back to the satellite and the plot plans? Just give me the orientation again of this.
So this is the subject parcel here. This is Waynesville Avenue, north, south.
And the stream runs to the back of the proposed?
You can see the stream here, kind of has this zig here, and then it extends going north. And this portion of the parcel is rather steep, coming straight off the road down to the stream and then back up this way.
As shown in the photograph that you had a minute ago.
Yes.
So what history does that have of flooding, or what are the historical water levels through there?
I can't speak to that as my level of expertise, but I mean, I guess you could make some assumptions based on looking at the photo itself, but I really couldn't add anything other than what's shown.
Does anybody have any other questions for Tyler? I do. So just to be clear, you have to have a parking space for a single-family residence?
Yes, for this area. If he were on the other side of the river, there's a parking exemption, but it wouldn't apply to this property.
Zoned R8.
Yes,
Do you know the width of the road on Waynesville?
it's 38. somewhere in there. Parcel has a 38.13 foot frontage along Waynesville Avenue.
I'm sorry, I was asking a different question.
Oh, sorry.
How wide is Waynesville Avenue?
Oh, how wide is Waynesville Avenue?
Sorry. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I think it's like a.
That I don't know. I could
Okay.
make a measurement on the GIS, but it's at least 20 feet wide.
And if we were to not grant a variance for him to do parking in this fashion, his options would be to either it's not buildable or come back with a different footprint that incorporates a parking scheme that gets out of the front setback, or a different variance, proposing a different layout.
It's kind of similar with hardship.
So right there on the site plan shown is an off-street parallel parking arrangement. It's 18 feet wide, 9 feet deep. The requirement for a single car would be 9 by 18, but turned the other way. So in combination with the aquatic buffer reduction, I don't really see any alternative other than potentially constructing a garage, which might add to the square footage of the home, or at least the square footage of the footprint.
So if the variance was approved for the parking space, you would be expecting the applicant to do a concrete driveway apron per code?
It would have to be reviewed by Chris Cairns, the transportation, but the variance would allow us to call that an approved driveway, and then between Chris and the inspectors, they could figure out the best design as far as like how the curb cut works with the radii. But
Right. So parallel parking spaces are 7.5 to 8 feet by 22 feet, and you still have angled space to maneuver into the space and out of the space. So having a 9 by 18 parking space right next to a fire hydrant is a little bit concerning, because I feel like at the end of the day, it's gonna be a lot wider than that. And I'm just curious as to if it was granted, or would we be granting enough? Or if it's just something to take into consideration, that laid out like that is not necessarily how it's in reality going to come to fruition, or it could be an additional concern.
Right, so it's two-part. One, the parallel parking space doesn't quite meet our approved driveway standards. And then, like you said, we don't allow maneuvering in and out of parking spaces using the city's right-of-way, which seems a little strange, but how that is interpreted is you can't, pull forward, pull back into the parallel space using the city street. The 9 by 18 is set by our code, which differs from if it were a city-approved parallel parking space within city's right-of-way.
Understood, but if it walks like a duck and.
Right. It's just clarifying the statement. I think that could be a potential for a condition. And then, like I said, if approved, we would handle this the same as any review, and the driveway would have to be reviewed by Chris Cairns as the city's engineer.
I think those are all the questions that I have right now. Anybody else have any other questions?
You mentioned that they'd be able to possibly pipe the stream. What does that do to any of their plans? Does that make any changes to it? If we required them to do something like that?
If they were to pipe the stream, they would be much more involved from an engineering perspective. An engineer, landscape architect would have to do stormwater calculations for the pipe, sign off on that. That would remove the aquatic buffer altogether. They could potentially build a home by right within the building envelope. But the aquatic buffer would be gone, and no requirement for mitigation or planting.
I will say, though, that looking at the jog in the stream, it would probably not go from property line to property line, which you can't do anyway, because you can't borrow from your neighbor to do whatever grading that would need to occur. So, as we've learned from some other projects in the past, as soon as the pipe ends, your buffer envelops the end of the actual pipe. So throughout the straight stretch of the pipe that's not incorporated into the bubbles at either end, yes, but I'm kind of thinking because of the property being so narrow and the jog in it would also not let you go all the way to even the setback line. Just spitballing that it may not be worth it because you'd still be looking at buffers on either side.
Right. So on the north and the southern end, there would be sort of like a reverse Pac-Man stretching out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nancy, is that your recollection of the openings at the ends? And I do think, and maybe Nancy, you could speak to this, but midstream piping of such a small section, a little bit challenging to obtain
To obtain
a permit for that.
Army Corps permit? Unfortunately, no.
It would be easy to obtain.
They're covered under, as long as it's under 150 feet, it's covered under a nationwide 27. It would just be where they would have engineering involved. So an engineer or landscape architect to design and to follow NCDQ standards for burying the pipe for aquatic passage.
Still having the buffer on either ends of the opening of the pipe. Okay. I think that's all I had. Tyler, anybody else?
Thanks.
Thank you. Does the applicant have a presentation or additional testimony for the board to consider?
Madam Chair, at this point, though, I think because we have so many people, I think it may be good to establish whether anybody else is asserting that they have standing in order to interact as a party in this matter. If everyone else is just seeking to offer witness testimony, we don't need to dwell on this. But if somebody thinks that they have the right to participate as a party, they should announce that and provide information tending to suggest that they would have standing.
So I had that listed when we get down to public comment. Do you want to go
Technically,
ahead
they
and-
would have the right to cross-examine what the property owner wished to say, so I think it should fall now more
Okay.
naturally.
Okay. Well, is there anyone here from the public that would like to give expert testimony or testimony from residents with standing?
Or participate in the hearing
Partic-
as a party with standing. is the
As a
way.
party with standing, participate, yes. Okay. Do you want them to state their name and whom they're representing?
Well, so I would suggest from here that each of those individuals should, in turn, one at a time, come up and provide testimony that they think demonstrates that they have standing, and then the board would need to rule on whether they think, whether you agree that they are entitled to standing.
Okay. Do you want to give us a quick little refresher on standing?
Sure, and that might be helpful to the public as well. So the ability to participate as a party with standing requires that you be able to demonstrate that you've suffered something called special damages. Not just anybody gets to participate as a party. Anybody can ask to provide testimony, but unless you're able to demonstrate that you meet that legal threshold of having at least raised an inference that you would suffer special damages, there's no ability to participate as a party to this matter. So special damages basically amount to, if you can show that you're very close to the subject project and that you will suffer a unique type of injury, or you think you'll suffer a unique type of injury because of the project that's not just general to the whole neighborhood, then you could conceivably have demonstrated that you would suffer special damages. But that's the threshold. You'd have to be a property owner, usually in relatively close proximity, and show that there's some specific harm to your property as a result.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Right now, let's get
Okay.
this items, are the people that would like to speak about whether or not they have standing. So we had 4 people raise their hand. If you want to come up one at a time and state your name and where you live, and perhaps we can pull up a map to identify. Thank you, Tyler. You can come on up, sir, and state your name if you want.
It's gonna be difficult without a mouse.
If that's too hard to do, you could just pull up the area map that showed the property highlight, the zoning.
Yeah.
My name's Gray Jernigan. I live at 52 Waynesville Avenue. It is 1, 2, 3, 4 lots away from the subject property here. I'm concerned about impacts to traffic and pedestrian safety on Waynesville, as well as flooding impacts to my property from potential flood risk caused by building in the aquatic buffer.
Are you downstream or upstream?
I'm upstream. I'm concerned about water backing up to my property. Sorry, Jernigan is Jernigan.
Do you want us to determine per each individual, or?
We'll need to, just on the, just to remind the board of the introduction that we read, there are certain topics that require the presentation of expert testimony, traffic impacts being one of those. That's the only item I heard mentioned that I needed to call out for you all as to whether you can accept just the statement of a lay witness on that front.
I will add on the water quality impacts, my background, I'm an environmental attorney. I have experience in land use, wetland, and water quality issues, and as well as flooding and things of that nature. So I offer that level of expertise.
And I'll share in a 2008 case from the North Carolina Supreme Court, stormwater and water quality issues are recognized as a potential basis to find special damages if there's also the finding that the person is in fact a property owner in the nearby area. So those types of concerns are of the variety that give rise to special damages and therefore standing.
So based off of that case in 2008, we would consider this applicant being upstream potentially to have standing or to have standing?
I don't know about the impact of the upstream and the orientation. I think that's a factual inquiry. And on that note, I'll also say that for the purposes of determining standing, you are not required to perform any sort of final assessment of whether you think that the individual has carried their case and shown that they're right in their version of the factual events. They just need to have plausibly stated a reason for their participation as a party with standing. So it's a lower standard if you ultimately conclude that this person does not have any identified harm as a result of being upstream as opposed to downstream. That might be something that you weigh in your ultimate balance of the factual evidence before you, but for purposes of determining standing, simply stating that that is the basis upon which they have a concern and finding that it is plausible, that should be enough to get past the standing threshold, even if you don't ultimately determine that what information they offer is dispositive of the merits issue of whether the variance should be granted.
And so as I'm looking at my cheat sheet, there's really no guidance into how we dismiss this gentleman? Are we just,
So I would recommend that there would be a motion to recognize, I'm sorry, Gray, I didn't catch your last name.
Jernigan.
Jernigan. It would either be a motion to find that he lacks standing or a motion to find that he has standing to participate further in this hearing.
And this is moving forward with each
Yes, each individual.
individual, okay?
okay,
Okay,
do I have a motion, one way or the other?
Can you repeat the impact?
The concern around water quality that I have, or the concern about flooding that I have,
Yes.
is that building a walled structure in a potential floodplain could cause water to back up to my property and exacerbate erosion and damage my property. And then on the traffic impacts, I'm not arguing any type of traffic impacts in terms of the volume of cars or anything. I'm simply arguing about pedestrian safety on this stretch where it's a very narrow section of road. We walk on it frequently, and having cars and pedestrians and potential construction traffic and the parking impacts of this request could have on public safety for me and my neighbors.
Thank you. Motion to recognize.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Simple majority. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, you may be seated, Mr. Jernigan. The next person that wants to come up? The lady in the yellow shirt?
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Frazier, and I represent New Belgium Brewing. My concern has to do with water quality and the impacts that activities within the aquatic buffer might impact the stream restoration that we completed downstream of this site.
Where do you live in relation to that property?
I do not live anywhere nearby, but I do work and represent New Belgium.
So I don't know the answer. Are you an attorney?
No.
Okay. The reason I ask is because that's a corporation, there's limitations on who can represent corporations in even quasi-judicial proceedings like this. So for your own purposes, you may not wish to proceed as representing New Belgium. There's a statute prohibiting the unauthorized practice of law, so that limits, in a way, it doesn't have anything to do with our ordinances, but it just, non-attorneys are not able to represent a party in a matter like this.
Understood. Thank you. I'm new to this.
You would still have the ability to provide evidence as a witness, though.
Okay. Can you cue me as to when that will be?
Yes.
At whatever point.
We'll be working through everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Renee Fortner, and I work with a nonprofit called Riverlink, And I was here to talk about water quality concerns. I'm not an adjacent landowner, but I am a subject matter expert, so I don't know if that makes me qualified in this situation to speak on the,
Not as a party with standing, but again, you would be able to offer testimony. It sounds like the one person who's already been recognized as a party with standing might have an interest in calling you as a witness, or you could volunteer yourself on that basis, but
Okay.
unless you own property in the nearby area and that would be impacted, then you wouldn't have standing.
okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Gail Perry. I am a property owner on Waynesville Avenue. I'm at 138 Waynesville, which is up from the property. My impact statement would be, one, of course, for water quality, of which I do not have the proper credentials for, but I can tell you about the traffic and the problems that occur because of the traffic, because of the construction that's been on Waynesville Avenue, and the difficulty for the safety of the residents in that area, in the adjacent area, walkers, bikers, kids, pets, etc. I've lived there for 9 years, so I have a really good idea of what construction impact is on Waynesville Avenue and on the traffic pattern, and also what the impact has been on the stream. Actually, it's a creek. It's Penland Creek. It's a free-flowing, constantly flowing waterway. There is, because of construction, there is a lot of debris that comes down the creek, and that's something I was going to speak to. So whether I'm in standing or not, I don't really know.
So again, the standards are, you consider items like proximity. I don't know what, that's your decision of whether you think the property owner is close enough to meet that aspect of it. The concerns about pedestrian safety, especially if the property owner is often a pedestrian in that area, can also be a basis for special damages. So that would be one of the aspects that get to special damages that I heard that you may consider. I don't know what you think about the proximity, but that's your decision to make.
Which is your house located?
I'm not real good at this. Is the green Waynesville Avenue? I'm at 138. I'm about a block and a half.
Are you all the way to Reynolds, or
Right there.
you're at the corner of Reynolds?
Right, no, I'm up from Reynolds.
Up being up the hill?
Up the hill, yes, ma'am.
South, okay.
Yes, south.
I have the Buncombe County GIS pulled up right now, but it is having a mental breakdown. So let's let it think for a second. But basically, there's a street that divides you
Yes.
and the rest of the lots that are dancing their way up / down the road to New Belgium.
True, correct.
Is there a discussion? Does anybody want to make a motion?
I can tell you that the stream is a very high volume, free-flowing stream. So any backup that would occur would affect just about everybody up or south of the property.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Technology is,
Yes. Oh, I see here.
there's just a few people in this building that are using the internet, so. Elliot has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
motion and say nay.
You'll second? You'll second?
Second?
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
What's the motion,
Well,
please?
we need to clarify that.
Restate the motion?
Okay, the motion was to allow this lady, Mrs.
Gil Perry.
Gil Perry, to testify,
Participate as a party.
participate as a party. That was the motion that Elliot made, and,
You may want a roll call vote for this.
yeah. And we got a reluctant second. Okay, so I will do a roll call vote, okay? Elliot Smith,
Okay.
Annette Wise,
Yay.
Bill Newman,
Nay.
Mr. Luciano,
Nay.
Suzanne Godsey is a nay.
So you will still be permitted to provide testimony, but.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we got that out of the way. Is there anybody else? There was 4. Okay, great. All right, so based off of that information, let's go back, and I believe the applicant has a presentation or additional testimony to share with the board. So if you'd like to come up.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Poovey. I am the applicant as well as the owner of the property. So I know it's listed as an LLC, but it is my personal property. I don't have additional presentation, but I did want to speak and say thank you to the board. Thank you to Tyler, Sam, and Nancy for your assistance so far in the process. A couple notes I wanted to review and highlight. I am also a licensed general contractor. The intent of this property is to be a second home for myself. I will be doing the construction on this home if it were to be approved. So I would be present for all construction activities, ensuring that there was minimal impact to the water buffer and that the variances, if approved, were upheld throughout construction. A couple notes I wanted to make in addition to that. The property is not currently in a floodplain. I don't believe it's in the 100 or the 500. I know that was a concern that was voiced. I know that there would be additional concern for flooding during construction. If the proper protocols were not in place regarding erosion control with a silt fence, that would, of course, be present throughout the construction. As mentioned, the variances that I'm requesting would be to reduce the front to 10 feet and the rear, a reduction of 33% to 20 feet permanently, and then additional 10 feet during construction, as well as the parking in the front of the property as side setback parking, to my understanding, is not permitted in this zoning. I cannot speak to safety of the neighborhood, of the impact of one additional house in the neighborhood to the safety of the neighborhood. I do not believe sidewalks are present in the neighborhood. So, of course, walking on the street does pose a safety risk, regardless of the circumstances of an additional house on Waynesville Avenue. I have made all efforts that I know to make through my brief education with the board with this process regarding riparian zone remediation, with the goal to plant 2 trees, 2 shrubs, and additional vegetation in the riparian zone at the completion of construction. That would surpass, I believe, what is currently on the property. There is 1 mature tree on the front right side of the property, a large decayed tree in the middle of the property, and then smaller vegetation throughout the parcel. I'm open to suggestions to bolster that riparian zone post-construction if these variances were to be approved, with the intent here to lessen, reduce, minimize the impact to the stormwater buffer and the stream as possible, while being able to build a practical home. That's all I have. Thank you.
Does anybody have a question? question for the applicant before he sits down. Sorry, he's got there. Do you, so for your temporary impact, is that grading or is that just
That would be minor
circulation?
grading and traffic around the back of the house. Yeah, accessing the rear for the concrete and the footings, the small pad and the staircase around the back of the property. It would be very minimal, but there would be potential. It was more of a safety net for myself to safeguard against potentially breaching that agreed upon variance.
And I couldn't get mine to pull up. You did say it was not in the 500-year floodplain?
I do not believe it's definitely not in the 100-year. I don't believe it's in the 500 either. It's been a while since I reviewed that.
I have been asking this to come up.
I couldn't get mine to come
as
up
well,
either,
so.
so.
Tell me how you set the 2 trees, 2 shrubs. Was that a calculation based off disturbance?
Just based on the suggested list, the Asheville riparian zone approved list, and size of the shrubbery at planting age and then at maturity to ensure that there was room for growth. Yeah.
Oh, so you set the quantities based off of,
Based on size,
Size.
yeah.
is this house a custom house or is it a plan book house?
It will most likely be a custom home that I'm drawing and designing myself for a second home. It won't be a planned home from, planbuilds.com or something of that nature.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yes. Yes, Suzanne.
Go ahead.
Tell me more about the parallel parking spot. Is it close to the curb, sidewalk?
It is there is no sidewalk.
There's no sidewalk?
No sidewalk. The property itself, it is relatively steep, I believe 12 to 14 feet. I'd have to see the topography map again and get a proper survey. But from the street, there is about 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet that are flat, and then it slopes off. The positioning of that parking pad is due to not being able to park or to have a parking in a side setback as well. So that parking pad, if approved, could be shifted farther away from the fire hydrant. I know that was a concern. It's positioned where it is due to the side setbacks and the front setback.
Yeah, that's my concern is how well will you buffer that pad from the street? Is there any proposal to, I mean, how far away?
I don't know, off the top of my head, I do not know the distance from the street to where my property begins. I think that's what you're asking, and I don't have that information with me.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm just thinking of some similar installations along Chestnut where the people have done that with their businesses. But they do things to kind of buffer, the impact, because having a car parked right there very close to the curb that way seems to be a problem.
Sure. I'm open to balusters or vegetation. I'm not sure what they did to impact that, but balusters would be a solution
Vegetation.
to place between the parking pad and the street, yes.
So as long as the parking occurs entirely on the subject parcel, there's no required buffer. As long as he has the parking minimum, 9 by 18, and that parking occurs on the subject parcel, there's no required buffer. So it would just be like the lip connecting the asphalt to the parking pad or parallel parking space.
So you would be able to pull into the space and just go back out.
You would.
Somebody mentioned earlier about it, having to reverse back out onto the street. Is that?
No, you would. There would be a radius aspect to the parking too.
Okay, that answers one of my questions.
Okay.
How wide of a shoulder is that on Waynesville at your property?
3 to 4 or 5 feet from the
So-
street to the property line.
From your site plan, there's not a lot of information for us to, we're trying to make some assumptions.
Regarding the parking?
And the parking, from what you're saying, obviously will be attached to something, either the house or a footer or something. But you've given yourself 9 feet for parking space. That person's gonna need to get out. What's happening is, are they going to be able to go, is there dirt behind that? Is there house? I think it's house. They gotta open the door. There has to be maneuverability to open the door to get out groceries and children and the dog and everything. And so you're not giving yourself a whole lot of room based off what we're seeing from the site plan. And with the shoulder being so narrow, you're going to have an issue on the backside of that parking space. What's happening there? We don't see that information based off of your site plan. We're having to make some
Understood.
assumptions.
Okay.
And I think that if we knew some more of the answers to that, it would clear up some things for us.
Okay.
Like to see a grading plan and to understand exactly how this residence is gonna sit on the site. What does it look like? What's the elevations? You know, that type of information always helps, when you are asking for a variance, because it's giving us the information that you've really thought through all of the options for the site, and you have, for example, when you gave yourself the space behind the building, great call, because you do want to ask for what you know you're going to need, not what you think you can shoehorn it in.
Right.
So, I do have some concerns about the driveway, so we can get to that in a little bit. Does anyone else have any other questions?
And I appreciate the comment, and with this being a personal project and a self-build, I didn't want to get too far along with architect fees, engineering fees, without knowing how this process would take place.
I can definitely understand that. You can do block sketches
Yeah.
of the elevations and that kind of thing too. You don't have to
Okay.
hire a professional just to give us just a general idea. Okay. No more questions for the applicant right now? Okay, great. If you want to just
Thank
take a
you.
seat for a second.
Technically, at this point, Mr. Jernigan, if he had a desire to ask any questions of the last witness, and for each witness that follows, he would be allowed to do so.
Okay.
But you, obviously not required, yeah.
Sure? Okay, so Mr. Jernigan does not want to ask any questions of the applicant. Do I just open it up now to the public, or do we?
First would be to check with Mr. Jernigan on whether he has any witnesses that he would specifically like to call, and then at the end, we would open it up to anyone that had not already provided testimony.
Okay, great. Mr. Jernigan?
I'd like to testify on behalf of myself, and I'd also like to call as witnesses Renee Fordner of Riverbank and Sarah Fraser from Belgium.
Is there a preferred order?
I can start.
Then if you
Okay.
could come up so that we can record.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity today to testify as a standing witness here. And thank you to the applicant for his presentation. Again, my background is an environmental attorney with experience in land use, wetlands, and water quality issues. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a upstream property owner, but I think my neighbors share my concerns. And many of them couldn't attend the hearing because of work obligations today. And I'd say that given the chatter on social media and elsewhere, there is concern about our neighbors that this property is developed in a way that protects all of our investments and our quality of life. And to be clear, this is going to be a challenging site to build on. As presented, I'm not comfortable with the design. I think the staff's findings that the property owner has an unnecessary hardship here is well-founded. But I disagree that the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. There's potential impacts to upstream and downstream properties, to pedestrians and drivers on Waynesville Avenue. But I think that can be mitigated through some creativity, some conditions, and some engineering on the site. And I appreciate the applicant's willingness to limit the impact on the aquatic buffer. We certainly don't want to see the stream go into a pipe or an engineered solution like that. But I think the proposal, as we've seen it, can certainly be improved to address these concerns. I'll go through the variance requests here and offer some thoughts on those. First, on the front setback, I support this. I think getting that house as far away from the stream as possible is a good thing. But the parking does raise an issue on this site. I'll offer a photo of the street that I took this morning. And I don't know if I can put this on a projector or if you want to just hand this around.
Maybe.
Do I need to turn it on? Oh, there we go. So I took this photo this morning. On the left side, you can see the fire hydrant and the meeting notice. And you see that Waynesville here is a narrow road, and it's hemmed in. It's very steep on the right side, looking up the hill. So there's no real shoulder for a car to get off of, to pass. And then the side of the road that this property is on drops off steeply down to the creek. The truck parked in there is a construction vehicle for this house being built across the street. This is typical on Waynesville. It's essentially a one-lane road, given the amount of construction that's happening. You see vegetation from the left spilling into the street. So, you know, it's a dangerous place to be on a bike or walking with your family. And just take that into consideration when you're considering the parking here is what I would ask. This is also used as kind of an alternate route, to cut through to bikers and walkers and runners. The Run Club comes through here. You know, it's an alternative to being on Haywood Road. So it's highly trafficked by pedestrians, and just reiterate that. But again, you know, I think a creative solution here, given the parking needs of the property and as well as the need to get the development as far away of the creek as possible, you know, I think I would lean on this board to find an appropriate condition that would kind of protect everybody, the developer as well as users of the road here. My primary concerns are around the aquatic buffer variances on this site. I would offer just one more image of some creative solutions around parking that I'll leave for you. This is almost directly across the street where a stilted construction. This is a 2-bedroom, 1.5-bed house that was built on a small lot with a kind of carport type parking situation underneath that has very small footers into the ground. It allows for 2 cars to get off the road, and if we're assuming a 2-car household here, you know, that means 1 car on the street if you're just approving 1 parking spot. Here's another one on Riverview. You know, another engineered solution, gets 2 cars off the street. But I also want to highlight the very small footers of this type of construction. This was to accommodate a very steep slope, but the same concept applies here. And I will move on to the site conditions here. You saw a similar picture to this in the presentation by staff. If you'll look right there, that is the top of kind of a rip-wrapped pathway that was repaired by the city recently, within the last year or so. This was a gully coming off of the road, and on Waynesville we don't have stormwater infrastructure that can pipe stormwater and get it to the place where it needs to go. Instead, during heavy rains, the street itself becomes the stormwater conveyance, and this is the property where that stormwater leaves the road and enters into the creek. All to highlight that this stormwater management on the site is going to be a real challenge. A silt fence is going to be inundated especially if water is allowed to be diverted off of the roadway and to fill the interior of the property at rates that far exceed the actual amount of rainfall that's going to fall here. Just really highlights the need to minimize the disturbance area just because of the extreme difficulty of managing floodwater here. You see the steep drop off to kind of a flat wetland floodplain type area, and then you can see the creek kind of glistening right in there. Upstream of this, behind the yellowish house and then the teal house, my house is on the other side of the teal house. The banks become very steep. They're eroded and steep, and we see a lot of water come through here. I mean, we get a lot of rain, and in a big rainfall event, this creek spikes quite significantly. I will show the floodplain map here, and that green representing the floodplain. I believe that's a 100-year floodplain. Staff can correct me. I don't have the legend on this map, but I printed it off of GIS. You'll see that the floodplain extends to the second property down from this one. And again, these floodplain maps are out of date. We're seeing more rainfall than ever here. Rainfall projections, both in quantity and intensity of rainfall events, are getting more severe. So, we've definitely seen flooding in this valley on this property over the years. Not just from the flow coming down the creek, but as I mentioned, from stormwater coming off of Waynesville Avenue, burying this creek. You see how at Craven Street, it backs up, right? There's a culvert going over the street into the New Belgium property. This shows the floodplain on New Belgium after their wetland restoration that allows for some floodplain where the creek isn't so constricted as it was for long before New Belgium opened up that creek. And so the constriction there at Craven Street causes the backup of water here. And, a lot and a half of buffer there doesn't give me a lot of comfort on an outdated map that doesn't account for the modern levels of rainfall that we see. It's not much of a margin of error for me and my neighbors. And again, these maps were created through remote sensing. They're not ground truth. So a real detailed analysis of what could happen when water backs up there, I think, is warranted here. On the design itself that's been proposed, the standard block foundation that's proposed on the site plan, I think, is inappropriate and concerning on the site. Building a wall in that area next to the creek could potentially obstruct flow and cause water to back up and damage upstream properties like mine. As I mentioned, the banks upstream are already steep and eroded, and this could cause more and substantial damage. But I think, again, there's a solution here. Putting the stream in a pipe is kind of the nuclear option, and we certainly don't want to see that. But as I mentioned, with the walled foundation potentially displacing water, an alternative to that is something like this, not necessarily a steel frame, but kind of limited piers with very small footers that might allow water to run underneath so that it doesn't back up. It would minimize the square footage of the permanent disturbance in the aquatic buffer. It would minimize the temporary disturbance and grading required to build on this site in a traditional block wall construction type manner. It would reduce construction runoff and sedimentation to the stream, the impact on downstream properties in the French Broad River, and it would minimize risk of flooding and erosion to upstream properties. It's also my understanding that several of the lots downstream of this property that have previously been granted variances were conditioned on this type of construction, and I think perhaps you could defer to staff on what those conditions were. But I've seen schematics for those that show this type of framed construction that elevates the structure above the floodplain area. Just a note on permitting, I think it seems to me that that flat area adjacent to the stream has wetland characteristics. I think a 404 jurisdiction is probably there for the Army Corps, and we haven't seen any opinion from the Army Corps as to whether there's jurisdictional wetlands there, so that's an additional piece.
On this piece of property?
That's correct, yes. By my observation is that there may be jurisdictional wetlands. Section 404 of the Clean Water Act is managed by the Army Corps. This is kind of a separate issue from the nationwide permit that was issued earlier, but there may be a requirement for 404 fill of wetlands if you're going to disturb a 404 jurisdictional wetland. And I think we'd like to see an opinion by the Army Corps as to whether or not there are jurisdictional wetlands there. There may also be North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality permit requirements that it would be important to see an opinion of the agency as to whether a permit is required or not. One additional piece that doesn't appear on the application checklist is that there is an analysis called a no-rise analysis that can look into building in low areas like this, typically floodplain, where a modeling analysis can be done to make sure that structures built in adjacent to creeks like this that are prone to flooding will not cause that backup of water. And
That is not applicable to this piece of property. And correct me if I'm wrong, this piece of property is not even in the 500-year floodplain. So it's well out of needing any kind of no-rise study and quite frankly, a little bit over the top for a single-family resident. So I would say continue.
I'm just offering that to protect my property that's right upstream of this. And so in conclusion, I would ask the board to consider a few different options on how to move forward here. The one would be to table a decision on this, give some instruction to the applicant as to what additional information you'd like to see, and to revise the design in certain ways that gives the board comfort in approving these 4 variances. A second course of action would be to condition approval on design changes to limit permitted improvements to a smaller footprint, to limit grading, and to ask for those jurisdictional opinions from the relevant permitting agencies, DEQ and the Army Corps, or to deny the request based on the information that you have at this time. I just again thank you for your attention to this and to the applicant for being willing to think in a creative way here. I think that it's almost in a place that could work, but with some engineering solutions to keep the footprint even more limited and perhaps all the way out of that aquatic buffer. I think we can find a place that allows this property to be developed in a way that protects the stream and protects surrounding properties. And may I leave these exhibits with the clerk?
Will you need to mark those and keep those for record?
We would.
Thank you.
And then it would be the same procedure for Mr. Poovey, the same opportunity that was extended to Mr. Jernigan to ask him questions about his testimony. Mr. Poovey would then have the right to ask any follow-up questions to Mr. Jernigan if he has any. You're not obligated to do so, but if you have any questions, you may.
Mr. Poovey, you don't have any questions for Mr. Jernigan?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jernigan? No, not right now? Okay. Got a question for Mr. Jernigan?
Thank you.
And then if you indicated you have 2 other witnesses.
Yes, I'd like to call Renee Fortner on behalf of Riverlink. And would just ask Renee to offer her testimony.
Thanks, Gray. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this proposal. Yeah, I will echo some of what Gray has said in terms of concerns around water quality. So I'm the Watershed Resources Manager at Riverlink, and we're a nonprofit focused on the environmental and the economic vitality of the French Broad River and its watershed. And we've worked extensively in this area. In 2016, we had a collaborative project just downstream of this parcel with the city of Asheville, installing green stormwater infrastructure along Craven Street, and then New Belgium, and the stream restoration project that they did there along Penland Creek. So that was a significant financial investment in protecting the French Broad River from runoff. And at the, there's actually a structure at the culvert that pipes Penland Creek below Craven Street and onto New Belgium's property that is designed to sort of capture sediment before it reaches the restored section of Penland Creek. And per the North Carolina Land and Water Fund grant that we received for that project, the city of Asheville is actually responsible for maintaining that sediment collection device there along the culvert. And that makes me think of, you know, the steep slope that exists on this parcel, and that even with sediment and erosion control measures in place, the likelihood of those measures failing on a slope of that, 33% slope, and given the stormwater runoff that's coming off of Waynesville Avenue and onto that parcel, you know, there's a high risk of that sediment and erosion control measure failing and sediment getting into the creek and then into this stormwater measure downstream. And, you know, also the fact that Penland Creek is flowing into a section of the French Broad River that's already listed as impaired for not meeting water quality standards. So just to highlight what happens on these small streams that flow into the French Broad River directly impact the water quality on the river as well. And, you know, the concept of having this aquatic buffer in place has been well researched. It's been proven that having that protected buffer of plants along a stream, ideally you would have a 50-foot protected buffer. In Asheville, we have a 30-foot protected buffer, and that's great. It's better than nothing, but we're already dealing with like the minimum that is needed to protect the health of a stream and water quality from on-land activities. And so to compromise that by allowing grading activities within that 30-foot buffer, permanent structures within that 30-foot buffer, really compromises the health of the stream. It increases the risk of stream bank erosion happening there, sediment getting into the creek and into the river, and then it also exacerbates flooding issues. So speaking to kind of what Gray has already spoken to, but then also Riverlink's investment there within that particular creek and the French Broad River. And, I'd like to encourage the board to not approve the variance to the aquatic buffer in particular for those reasons.
I've got a question.
Yes.
So would you support the engineered alternatives that Mr. Jernigan proposes, for example, the piers?
I think that would be a better alternative to piping the stream. Yes. Minimizing the footprint within the buffer, or ideally just keep it out of that 30-foot buffer if possible. Yeah, thanks.
Same option for Mr. Booby if he has
Mr.
any
Booby, do
questions.
you have any questions for?
No questions, just want to reiterate, maximum efforts will be made within that enduring zone for meeting existing conditions or improving them with vegetation.
I'd like to call Sarah Frazier to testify on behalf of New Belgium.
Thank you. Sarah Frazier with New Belgium. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. New Belgium occupies that piece of land, pretty much all of that side of Craven Street across from Waynesville Avenue. We purchased that site in 2012 and opened in 2016. And in that 4-year interim, there was a lot of site prep that happened in advance of building the brewery and facilities. One of those was the site was classified as a brownfield, so we worked with the state brownfields program to remediate the soil. And then this creek, this stretch of Penland Creek that passes through our campus, Renee alluded to it, mentioned it, with Riverlink's help and the city of Asheville's help, we secured state funding through what was at that time called the Clean Water Management Trust Fund. I believe it's now the Land and Water Fund, to complete a stream restoration. That encompassed a few different things. It was something of, I don't know, a Grand Canyon of Asheville at that time. It was eroding, contributing sediment to the French Broad during big storm events, as we saw. So stabilizing vegetation was one piece of it, creating a series of pools that gradually step down the elevation of the creek as it flows to the French Broad, slowing the velocity and the ability of that water to erode the stream banks was another. The enormous culvert that was placed that extends all the way under Craven Street, under our parking area, does not have a bottom to it. It's got a natural cobble bottom to provide habitat for aquatic invertebrates and other critters that inhabit it. And certainly there was a whole lot of stormwater infrastructure that was put into place, both within our parking areas and around the campus, that accommodates and manages stormwater that flows across our property and from Craven Street. Renee mentioned that structure. I've always referred to it as a forebay. I don't know the exact terminology. It is on the Waynesville side of Craven Street, and it's this concrete structure that as water and high rain events comes through, it allows the sediment to kind of fall out of solution before the water passes on. The city has been an amazing partner. They come through regularly with a vacuum truck and suck out that sediment. I don't know how much they keep eyes on it. I'm in that creek once a week taking water samples that go to a lab that evaluates turbidity, conductivity, nitrates and phosphates, and I don't remember all the parameters. I don't have that data with me. We could certainly pull it up. Conductivity and sediment have been big factors that have been problematic in Penland Creek in the 8 years that I've been in that position, looking at it monthly. And certainly, this is anecdotal, but with the construction that's happened upstream on Waynesville, we've seen anecdotally again, a lot more sediment coming down. We certainly seem to be having higher rain events, and the creek backs up, or I should say the river backs up into that creek corridor. Happy for any of you all to come visit, be happy to show you on the ground, but it's sort of this terraced stream restoration corridor down there. It sometimes backs up in lower stretches all the way to that first terrace. I say all this to illustrate the thoughtful intention and the investment that's been put forward by not only us, but by the city, community partners, to improve and have a positive impact on water quality in this area. And so I would just ask you to consider those investments, the city's ongoing efforts to manage that sediment in that trap, and broader efforts. We are one of, I think, 80, 90 plus members of something called the French Broad River Partnership that is actively working on, as Renee mentioned, this 19-mile stretch of the Asheville section of the river that is been listed on the state or federal list of impaired streams. So we're actively trying to be participants in that. So I just ask you to consider those investments that have made as you take into consideration this. And I thank you for all your work to balance the various needs of the community, you know, both for housing that we also need in this community as well as the environmental protections. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Poovey, do you have any questions for Mrs. Frazier?
No, thank you for your
Thank you.
That's all I have.
So this would be the point at which anybody who wishes to provide testimony but is not recognized as a party would be allowed to do so if you so choose. If I can, I'll just read the section of state law that applies here. So here's the section that we've just done, and this is 160D-406. It says, the applicant, the local government, and any person who would have standing shall have the right to participate as a party in the evidentiary hearing. That's the portion we just did. It continues to say, other witnesses may present competent, material, and substantial evidence that is not repetitive as allowed by the board. So you may now allow additional people to testify, if you find that the same thing is being said over and over and it's not adding to your understanding, that's when it would get into repetitive, and under the statute, you're not supposed to hear that. But if there continues to be new evidence shown to you that's relevant to your considerations, you can hear from as many witnesses as you choose to.
Okay, with that said, is there anyone wishing to speak further about this variance? Variances.
Yeah, my name is Zen Sutherland, and I'm a 20-year resident of Waynesville Avenue, or I'm much farther up, though. And in fact, the Penlands Creek sort of starts around where I live, and it really flows from Haywood Road there. It starts where it's runoff, but there's enough flow for it to flow for the entire year, even dry summer times. My concerns are the fact that the road is not just narrow in terms of parallel parking, but the slope of the road actually had to be cut into the hill so that opposite this property is a wall, is a rock wall. And this road, Waynesville Avenue, has been a great alternative to Haywood Road, at least as far as both bicycles, dog walkers, everybody, and having, another car to deal with, and or two cars, I don't know, but really puts an impact on this little, where it's kind of squeezes down, and the city is already working on the only other piping that has happened on other than the roads that cross the Penlands Creek. There's really only one, and that's much farther up. The other thing is, I'd just like to repeat I'd end up repeating what they've said, and I'm just concerned about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments.
Madam Chair, for every witness after here, we also have to extend to Mr. Poovey and Mr. Jernigan the opportunity to cross-examine if they wanted to. They're not obligated to.
No questions. I would just ask that we keep in mind repetitive testimony and I not repeat my presentation.
And for both parties, if you have a desire to recall anybody or present more evidence afterwards, you'll be allowed to do so as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sharon Summerall. I'm a former board member of the Urban Forestry Commission on the Tree Protection Task Force. And I got an email regarding this and took a look at it and made some emails, asked some questions. And I understand, Mr. Booby, what you're going through on a substandard lot. And the only difference I want to say, which may be a burden on him, is that we need a landscape plan. I'm a landscape contractor by trade. And with the amount of grading that's going to be done and the impact of the vegetation, and I know it's a little for a single-family development to ask, but with the impact that it's going to have, we need to see better vegetation, replanting as opposed to 2 trees and 2 shrubs. You're going to need grasses, riparian, and to make sure that the water runoff doesn't impact the stream as it is going to do for sure. So I understand the impact on him, but I really think it needs to be required. So thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have a question for Mrs. Summerall?
I would love to speak further about options to repair the zone there to water runoff. I'm open to any suggestions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Yes.
I will not repeat or go back over what everyone else has said, and it's good to meet you. I am a resident on Waynesville Avenue, so there's a great concern, and I will speak just to the traffic kind of quickly. Since I've been there for 9 years, construction has never stopped on Waynesville Avenue. It has become a thoroughfare from the river, River Arts District, from Craven, up through to Haywood. So there is a traffic problem there in terms of the number of cars. Now you add in the construction vehicles, which have literally been there for 9 years. It's unbelievable. Also, the erosion on the road, on the side of the roads, has been very impactful. We have a lot of school buses that come down that road. When I say come down, south on that road, they have to actually go off the pavement to get past the construction vehicles and the other vehicles that are parked on the street. So to speak to the traffic, we've had 3 accidents on Waynesville Avenue. One, they hit our fence, side fence. Another one hit a car. We've had 2 bicycle accidents where the bicycles were hit. I don't know about pedestrians. This has all been in the last few years. But it is highly dangerous on Waynesville Avenue. And I realize Mr. Podium feels that, one more house isn't going to really make a difference in terms of the traffic and the parking, but it's continuous. It never stops. So I ask that maybe with the parking, there is some movement of the parking or there's some change in the parking. Otherwise, the possibility of another car being on Waynesville is very high. And we just can't have it. And I'm just speaking for the neighborhood, I'm speaking for everyone. It's really been a very stressful situation for us. So thank you, sir, and thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. Perry? So is there anyone else wishing to speak? So at this time, I will close what I think was the public hearing.
Well, I would just say that, and I don't know the answer, but if Mr. Poovey or Mr. Jernigan have any additional evidence, I would just check with them to make sure that they've had everything heard that they wanted to be heard.
Okay, I'm getting thumbs up from both gentlemen that they are good. They don't have anything additional to add.
So now it is to your discussion, so staff have looked up some of the questions they heard from you all, so it might be possible to get a couple of those questions answered as well, if we can call up Nancy Watford.
That would be fantastic, Nancy, if you'd come up, thanks.
Just to streamline it, and since we're doing this formally, I'll just ask Ms. Watford the questions.
Great.
So, Ms. Watford, could you please state your name and position with the city for the record?
Yes, I'm Nancy Watford. I'm the zoning supervisor at the city of Asheville.
And you heard the testimony that's just been provided to the board here today.
Yes.
In that testimony, did you hear questions about the width of Waynesville Avenue?
Yes, I did.
And are you able to shed any light on what the actual right-of-way width of Waynesville Avenue is?
Yes. So Waynesville Avenue from Westville Place to the end of Curb and Gutter, which is about Brownwood Avenue, which is not even on the map here, is 25 feet in width with a right-of-way of 30 feet. Past the Curb and Gutter, down to Craven Street, it's 18 feet in pavement width with a 30-foot right-of-way.
And then the only other question I heard asked that I don't believe was answered was regarding the floodplain. Do you have any information that you can provide about the floodplain in the area of the subject project?
Yes. The floodplain is, as you can see there, is the 500-year floodplain. And it's about 2 parcels down. And then it continues to be 500-year underneath Craven Street, because this is tailwaters from French Broad.
So it's a 500-year floodplain?
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure I understand. Did you hear anything else that you wanted to add information on?
Nope, I'm good.
Can I ask you a question? Right in front of the house where he's proposing to build, how wide is the road right there?
It says that 18 feet.
18. And how far from the edge of the pavement to the right-of-way, how far is that?
I don't know. I mean, the right-of-way is 30 feet within
So
there.
it'd be 15.
So it's whether the road is in the center of that
Should be 6
right-of-way
feet,
is,
I would assume.
And to Nancy's point, so let me just do it as question and answer to continue it. Is every right-of-way, is every road in the city of Asheville squarely within the center of the right-of-way?
no,
And is that why you can't answer definitively as to how much
Correct.
boundary there is?
and that we just have an adopted list that shows us what the right-of-way width is, and
Is there anything on
Roadway.
the information you've gotten from the applicant that shows where the right-of-way is?
Yeah, true.
That's what they were saying right there. With it being steep on the upper side.
Right.
okay, so based off their boundary survey, which we're not measuring off of, it's 3 to 5 feet from the edge of pavement, it looks like. That's on his survey that was in the presentation, or exhibit C, D, and F in your exhibit packets.
Can you show that?
It should be in the files that I can show as well.
Check that black line.
There should be a scale at the bottom, right?
Right, so this is taken from their survey. But it doesn't necessarily show the pavement width either.
And then I made a couple scale measurements. You can see.
Oh, I did have one question. I feel like something was said, even if the house is put on piers, the ground underneath those piers would be considered impervious surface. Is that correct?
It's considered, I mean, yes and no.
But
Yes,
it's not like
it is
decking.
considered impervious from how NCDQ defines impervious surface, in that when you're looking from the surface of the earth, can the water, as it's falling, it's gonna be interrupted by the imperviousness of the roof. But it still does have some natural characteristics of being allowed to allow water to flow in and out. But it is considered impervious surface.
While Nancy's up there, does anyone have any other questions for Nancy?
I don't think so.
No. Is that it? Thank you. Thank you so much. Discussion? Votes?
Can I ask you another question? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What is your foundation going to be coming down? How are you planning to build that house?
This is showing up a block foundation.
So you're going to have a stem wall. I'm just looking at elevations based on GIS. It's going to be roughly 20 foot tall. Stem walls,
No, it should be closer to
12.
12. In the back, to grade.
What's your dimension supposed to be from the house to the creek? From the house to the creek, how far is the dimension?
From the house to the creek,
Yep.
it would be 20 feet. That would be the stream buffer
Okay.
after the variance.
To the actual creek, what's the distance from the creek back to the house?
It looks like at the closest point, it would be 20 feet. It would be right at that 20-foot stream
20
buffer
foot.
line.
Because the buffer starts at the side of the property, and that 20-foot arc is where it hits the closest point to the back of the property. So it would vary at different points.
So I see 18 feet on that one point right there coming back What's the other dimension coming back to the house right there?
That shaded area, I believe, is the temporary.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious.
those measurements were mine just
Okay.
for drawing the shaded area. This one has less details, but you can see the 30-foot buffer there. So if you just subtract those points, then, yeah, it seems it ranges from about 18 to 20 throughout.
To the stream buffer, but how far from the house to the stream?
I would say 28 to, well, 22 to 20, roughly. And then that's measured from the top of the bank, not the center of the stream.
Thank you.
Discussion-wise, for me, this is a lot of speculation. So it's very uncomfortable for me to make a decision and to have a lot of speculation. Additionally, the safety aspect, which is always leaning towards safety, concerns me deeply. Fire hydrant, pedestrians, that's my position.
Anyone else? I'd like to have more, I appreciate infill. I'd like to have maybe a little bit more information of, maybe some additional things about the, it sounds like the landscaping, as it is right now, is gonna be improved with what they've got in the plan now. I mean, it looks like kudzu and one dead tree. And so it looks like there's some of that could be, that could be helped. But I'm with you, I'd like to have a little bit more detail of.
The owner indicated also that they weren't really sure, so asking the board to make a decision on the speculation, and I don't know that that's an appropriate thing for us to do, to make a decision on speculation.
Am I allowed to speak at this time? or-
Sure.
What speculation regarding the riparian zone? The vegetation?
Correct. Vegetation.
I mean, I have my proposed replanting in the riparian zone on the site plan. The speculation would be increased vegetation beyond what I have proposed, which I'm compliant, but I do have a proposed riparian zone remediation on the site plan.
And that would be staff approved as you go through the process.
For revegetation mitigation, you could approve with specific conditions that would then be adhered during the permit review. So he would approve the variance, set conditions, he would apply for a single-family permit. I would review, potentially me or another colleague would review that permit based on the approved conditions of the variance. So what he's shown here is subpar for your comfort level to mitigate the impacts of gradient and erosion permanently to the aquatic buffer. Then you could set specific conditions for more detail, as well as, for the parking arrangement and any other site-specific details.
There was one other question I forgot to ask Nancy, if she can come back up just real quick.
Fantastic.
The other note that we had when you were asking questions, you all mentioned the previous variances on this same roadway, and that those buildings were, there was a question of whether those were conditioned on having piers as opposed to a block wall footing. Nancy, I believe you've been with the city for the same period of time when those variances were issued. Do you remember those variances?
Yes, some,
then-
to some degree.
And is it right that they were conditioned on having pier footings, or were they proposed initially to have pier footings?
The applicant proposed piered footings as part of the application, as part of their means to reduce the impact on the aquatic buffer.
So the pier footings were part of those previous
So it's-
development applications?
Yeah, it was part of the application, not as a condition of the board.
Could that be a condition? It could be.
Is
Yeah.
that,
It can be a condition.
And so I think what you're getting to is that this board's got the authority to attach whatever conditions you think are appropriate. I'm hearing that some of you may not feel that you have enough information right now to know exactly what those conditions should be. If there's a specific list of items that you would wish the applicant to explore and then present more information on, you could continue this hearing to a later date and then have that information brought back if you think that that will help you more completely develop your list of conditions for the property. But I think if you're going to go that route, I would say offering the applicant some guidance on what information you'd like to see or have explored in order to make your decision would be useful here.
well, here's where I am with this piece of property. It's an existing non-conforming lot that you do have a right to develop on. It definitely has a lot of site constraints. So in that respects, I do believe that no matter what plan you came to us with, you would be asking for a variance for something. What those somethings would be is really up to you and your proposal. The piece of property, it's impacting about 35 linear feet of stream. It's a spit in the overall grand scheme of stormwater. He's not adding, the footprint is small. This impact of impervious surface is very, very minimal. I'm a licensed landscape architect. And and you have to balance out the need for infill lots, and really looks like perhaps this might be the last one on that street based off of the location of the stream, going through the rest of the parcels as you head towards French Broad, but who knows? So I do think that your proposal is lacking a lot of particulars that would really help us to be able to get some kind of comfort level as to how you really intend to develop the property. So whether it's a building floor plans, where's the front door, you may find out you don't actually even need this front setback in a parallel parking situation. I feel like we need additional information, a preliminary grading plan, even if it's a napkin sketch, something for us to be able to look at. You've got some other licensed professionals up here that know how to read plans and can understand what you've got going on in your brain, because I know you've been thinking about it. It's just, we need that translated to us so that we can understand a little bit more about what your plans are for the property.
I could have been prepared with that information had I known that it would have been, I understand it's valuable, but I could have had.
That's where the speculation comes in.
So technically, I think we need to hear whether the applicant would like to have this continued to your next meeting so that there can be additional evidence provided then. It's not, ultimately would need to be a motion from you to have it continued to the next meeting if that is the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I would ask what additional details I need to have prepared besides a preliminary grading plan. If I can have specifics, that would be very helpful.
The grading plan, I think, is going to tell us a lot about that parallel parking space and what's happening there. General information on where you want to have the front door. If you could give us some elevations, that would be good. And again, napkin sketch. You're not tied to building, you know, cedar shakes on a, I mean, we don't need that level of detail, but just to get an idea of what you're thinking. And if you're agreeable to peers, it sounds like peers are in favor.
I think it also helped to have, like, bottom corners near the string right there, to where you can take a picture from the string coming back toward where the house foundation would be right there, so we could see that a little bit better, based on elevation right there.
And photography from that down there?
Yeah,
I think it
that
would be
nice.
nice.
Be able to see the lot down there a little bit.
So you're asking me to get it staked off for a future footprint?
Say it one more time.
Staked
Do you want him to stake the future footprint or just the back part?
I think the front side is, I think it'd be helpful just to see it all, that way you can see where that is in relation to your parking up front. And it could just be a stake with a ribbon on it to where you can, where we can see where it is right there.
Does anyone else have anything else to add?
I think that would
Anything
be,
additional?
We just need to know what you're thinking.
because as you said, we, you know, infill's great.
I need to physically see it, I'm sorry.
I know.
To physically see what you're thinking.
I'm just your echo.
So the applicant has asked to continue the meeting to our next meeting date, which is
March 25th.
March 25th. And so at this time, do we,
You can take a vote on that. Technically, Mr. Jernigan, if he wanted to oppose that, he could, but I'm seeing him shake his head no, so I think you all are at the point where you would take a vote on the motion.
all right, would someone like to make a motion to continue this for the applicant?
I motion to continue next meeting.
Second.
Great. Roll call?
Or
Okay.
no, you can do it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay,
That's it. This
that's
is
it.
continued.
We're continued, so we'll be back next month. And that is it. If there's no other objections, we can adjourn this meeting. Any objections?
Any objections?
All right.
No objections.
This meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Thanks.
you.